Okay, hello again. We'll talk about multipliers and other variables in closed and in open economies. We'll make comparison. This is the file that was corrupt and many students could not watch it because my voice was disappearing. So let's first look at intercept in closed and in open economy. Then we'll look at the slope in closed and in open economy and at other things as well. So uh, aggregate expenditure is represented by the intercept on the y-axis, on the vertical axis. So therefore, if aggregate expenditure increases, then aggregate expenditure shifts up parallel. If it decreases, aggregate expenditure shifts down parallel. So aggregate expenditure in closed economy is defined as C plus I plus G. There is no exports and no imports. And in open economy, respectively, it is represented by C plus I plus G plus X minus M, which is the net exports. So what will be the effect on intercept in closed and in open economy? Imagine that interest rate increases. If it is a closed economy, the only effect will be from the money market to the goods market. Interest rate higher, investment lower, consumption lower, G constant, and aggregate expenditure decreases by certain amount. But what will happen in the open economy? In the open economy, we will continue to have this same effect, interest rate up, investment down, consumption down, but also there will be additional effect due to the openness of the economy. If interest rate is higher, there will be more inflow of financial capital, there will be smaller outflow of the financial capital, and demand for domestic currency will increase, and the currency will appreciate. And there will be decrease in exports and increase in imports. So overall, the effect on intercept would be larger in an open economy. Income will decrease due to this effect, but also aggregate expenditure and income will decrease due to this effect. You can clearly see if exports is smaller, aggregate expenditure and income is smaller. Imports higher, the aggregate expenditure and income smaller. So due to this additional effect, the fluctuation of aggregate expenditure and income is larger in open economy than in the closed economy. Regarding the appreciation of the currency and decrease in exports, increase in imports, we already discussed it. Let me repeat again. If there is appreciation of domestic currency, the price of imports is smaller and the quantity, the value of imports is larger. And if there is appreciation of domestic currency, it means there is depreciation of foreign currency, because both currencies cannot appreciate together and depreciate together. So if domestic currency appreciates, foreign currency depreciates. And in that foreign country, the price of imports is higher and the quantity of imports is smaller. But their imports is our exports. So therefore, if their imports decreases, it also means that our exports to this foreign country decreases. That's why appreciation of domestic currency is decreasing the exports from domestic to overseas. And also note that appreciation or depreciation of domestic currency does not affect the price of exports in domestic currency, because it's a purely domestic price. Okay, so overall, the effects on intercept are larger in open economy than in the closed economy. What about the slope? The slope, we need to look at the multiplier. So in the closed economy, the multiplier is 1 divided by 1 minus b plus bt. And in the open economy, it's 1 divided by 1 minus b plus bt plus m. We are talking here, of course, about consumption, investment, and government expenditure multipliers, not taxation, not imports, because otherwise we'll have minus 1 or minus b. We'll look at this multiplier. So you compare the denominators for closed and open economies, and you will see the denominator is larger in the case of open economy because we have plus m here, which means that the overall expression for open economy is smaller. The multiplier is smaller for the open economy. But the logic will be same if you look at T and taxation and import multiplier. Okay, overall, intercept effects are larger in the open economy, but multiplier effects and slopes are smaller in the open economy than in the closed economy. Then, IS curve in open and in closed economy. We know that IS, the slope of IS, depends on the sensitivity of investment to changes in interest rate, parameter E, and also depends on parameters B, T, and M. So let's look at this B, T, and M. So when B increases, T decreases, M decreases, multiplier is larger and IS is flatter, because for the same level, for the same change in interest rate and investment, change in income would be larger because B is larger, T is smaller, M is smaller. So delta R, delta I is smaller than delta Y, and IS is flatter. And the opposite case, when B, marginal propensity to consume is smaller, taxation rate higher, marginal propensity to import is higher, multiplier is smaller, and IS is steeper. For the same change in R and I, change in income is smaller. Delta R, delta I is bigger than delta Y. So we showed that the multiplier for open economy, we show it here, is smaller than for the closed economy. And it means this case is applicable for the open economy. IS is steeper for open economy. If we look at parameters B, T, and M and the multiplier effects, we can clearly see that IS in the open economy should be steeper than in the closed economy. Multiplier smaller in open economy, this case applicable, IS is steeper for open economy. But that's regarding BT and M. But if you look at parameter E, the opposite conclusion will hold. So when E is smaller, IS is steeper. For any change in interest rate, change in income and investment is smaller, because E is small. But when E sensitivity parameter is large, IS is flatter. For some change in interest rate, the change in income and investment would be larger. So in the closed economy, we have change in interest rate, change in investment and consumption, change in income. But in the open economy, we also have additional effect. So you will have change in interest rate, appreciation, depreciation of the currency, change on of exports and imports, and additional change in income. So in other words, so IS is flatter, because if there is change in interest rate, there will be only one change in income in the closed economy, but in the open economy, there will be this change in income and another change in income. So the bigger change in income than change in interest rate. That's why IS is flatter, and there is greater sensitivity of income to the interest rate. Here, only one effect, but here there are two effects, this effect and this effect. So IS is flatter. So what can we conclude regarding the slope of IS? Due to the multiplier effect, IS is steeper in the open economy, but due to the interest rate effect, IS is flatter in the open economy. So what can we conclude? It depends which effect is larger, multiplier effect or interest rate effect. So what affects the slope of IS more, BT and M or parameter E and sensitivity of income to the interest rate? So we cannot answer the question unless we have the real data. We do the empirical estimate, right? So in general, the shape of IS curve in open economy can be any, steeper or flatter, depending which effect dominates. Regarding LM curve, it has same shape in open and in closed economy, because it depends on the situation in the money market, on parameter F and parameter G, and they do not depend on exports or imports. They do not depend on interest rate or exchange rate. They depend only on the situation in the money market. So that's what you need to know. And then I also put here some examples. So example one you can skip, because it's just a general explanation how to find the multiplier and equilibrium output. So you just formulate aggregate expenditure, set it equal to y, and find equilibrium y. And we find that exogenous expenditure this, equilibrium output twice bigger, meaning that multiplier is 2. But now, let's look at this second example. What happens in the closed economy if interest rate changes, and what will happen in the open economy if interest rate changes? Interest rate changes by the same amount, from 10% to 11%. But what you need to see, the difference. In the closed economy, aggregate expenditure is this, while in the open economy, aggregate expenditure is this. What's the difference? The difference is following. You obviously see that instead of putting I investment, I equal to I0, we expand it. We write I is equal this minus 1000 R. It's just showing that investment depends on interest rate, and negative sign here, meaning that interest rate higher, investment lower, and the other way around, negative relationship. And what is minus 1000? It's parameter E, sensitivity of investment to changes in interest rate. We just write the extended version of aggregate expenditure. What about here? Same, also minus 1000 R, same parameter E. We also have exchange rate here because it's an open economy. In the closed economy, the exchange rate does not matter. And why is it negative sign here in front of exchange rate? Because high exchange rate, stronger currency, appreciation of currency, lower exports, higher imports, and negative effect on aggregate expenditure. That's why necessarily it's a negative sign. Just showing that aggregate expenditure is negatively related to appreciation of domestic currency. And one more thing. Here the multiplier is 0.8. Why? But here in the open economy it's 0.5. Why? Why? Because multiplier is smaller in open economy than in closed economy. Is it? Yes, it is. The multiplier for open economy is smaller, as we just established here. And so, if interest rate rises, what will happen? What will happen? So here at 10% interest rate, the interest rate at 10% interest rate, given this expression, the income is 4,500. How do we find it? Aggregate expenditure 0.8y plus 1,000 minus 1,000 times 0.1. 0.1 is 10% interest rate. And to find equilibrium, we set this expression equal to y, rearrange. So remember, I repeat again. So instead of R, you will have 0.1 here. Set this expression equal to y, find y. Y will be 4,500. And if interest rate increases to 11%, then we will have here 0.8y plus 1,000 minus 1,000 times 0.11, because now the interest rate is high, 11%. And again, equal to y, find the equilibrium y will be 4,450. What has happened? In the closed economy, interest rate increased by 1 percentage point, income has fallen by 50. GDP fell by 50. You can clearly see 4,500, 4,450. Now let's repeat the same exercise for the open economy. Let's see what will happen. So originally you will plug 10% interest rate here, 0.1 here, and let's assume that originally exchange rate is 1 to 1. One domestic currency, one foreign currency. So it will be times 1. Plus 0.5y, set it equal to y, solve for y, and you will get that y will be equal to 1,600. Yes, here, 1,600. That's when interest rate is 10% and exchange rate 1 to 1. But now interest rate has increased to 11%, so here you will plug 0.11. And because interest rate has increased, the exchange rates have changed as per uncovered interest parity. Higher interest rate, 11%, will change the exchange rate. Exchange rate will now be 1.0091 to keep the same parity condition. And so now you will multiply minus 100 times 1.0091, not times 1. And again, all that expression equal to y, solve for y, and y will now be equal to 1578.18. So what has happened to GDP? GDP decreased, but not by 50 as it was in the case of the closed economy, but decreased only by 2192, the difference between 1600 and 1578. Explanation of this. So IS is, look, IS curve is steeper in open economy than in the closed economy. Interest rate effect same in here and in here, but the multipliers are different. Multiplier in open economy is smaller than in the closed economy. And IS, and just showing that IS is steeper in the open economy than in the closed economy. So the effect on income is smaller in the open economy. You can clearly see it's only 21.82 as opposed to 50. Same change in interest rate, but smaller change in income. Therefore, IS is steeper in open economy. And it is steeper because the multiplier effect dominates the interest rate effect. Interest rate effect was same from 10% to 11%, same, but multiplier effect dominated in this example 2, example 3. And one more thing regarding the another example regarding expansionary monetary policy. So first of all, expansionary monetary policy means that money supply increases, interest rate decreases, and it happens in China. In China, money supply has increased, interest rate has decreased from 11% to 10%. So what does it mean? It means that there will be two effects. There will be two effects. There will be there will be a higher demand for New Zealand exports. Why so? Because it's decrease in the interest rate, and there will be depreciation of Chinese currency, and there will be higher demand for New Zealand exports. And at the same time, there will be, so in other words, it's positive effect on New Zealand, higher effect, better effect on New Zealand exports. But at the same time, decrease in interest rate in China causing depreciation of Chinese currency and appreciation of New Zealand currency. So it's a negative effect on New Zealand income. So you see, there are two opposing effects. That for New Zealand exports, there will be greater demand for New Zealand exports, but at the same time there will be appreciation of New Zealand currency and its negative effect on New Zealand exports, on New Zealand income. So which effect will dominate? So in this case, you need to compare the income, the GDP in New Zealand prior to this change in Chinese monetary policy, and New Zealand GDP will be 1580, and you will compare it with New Zealand GDP after the change in Chinese monetary policy. After the change in Chinese monetary policy, New Zealand GDP would be this one. And you will compare, you will solve the equation 1578.2 plus 2 delta x equal to 1580. And you will find that delta x would be equal to 0.9. So if that's the borderline. If delta x is smaller than 0.9, the overall effect on New Zealand GDP would be decline in New Zealand GDP. But if delta x is bigger than 0.9, then New Zealand GDP will rise. Because, as I just said, there will be two opposing effects. On one hand, there will be higher demand for New Zealand exports on the part of China, so it's good. New Zealand GDP is supposed to increase, but on the other hand, there will be appreciation of New Zealand currency and its negative effect on New Zealand GDP, as we just explained here. Higher exchange rate and appreciation is negatively related to aggregate expenditure and income in the country where exchange rate appreciates. and it appreciates. Let me repeat again, because if interest rate in China is decreasing, it means there will be outflow of funds from China to New Zealand. And if there is outflow of funds from China to New Zealand exchange rate will start to appreciate. And why there will be higher demand for New Zealand exports? Because lower interest rate in China from a decrease from 11 to 10% will stimulate Chinese aggregate expenditure. So income will be higher in China. And how income is related to Chinese imports? If income in China is higher, it means imports into China is also higher. But imports into China is what? Exports from New Zealand to China is same. Chinese imports is New Zealand exports. That's why, let me repeat again, decrease in the interest rate in China has positive effect on New Zealand exports, because Chinese income is increasing and Chinese imports from New Zealand is increasing. Positive effect on New Zealand GDP. But at the same time, decrease in interest rate in China causes outflow of funds to New Zealand, and New Zealand dollar starts to appreciate, and it's decreasing exports from New Zealand. So that's why we want to compare two opposing effects, and we want to find when New Zealand GDP will fall, when New Zealand GDP will rise. New Zealand GDP will fall when delta X is smaller than 0.9, and New Zealand GDP will rise when delta X is bigger than 0.9. If you divide 0.9 by the original New Zealand GDP, just divide 0.9 times 1580 times 100, you will find that 0.9 is 0.056% of New Zealand GDP over this, of 1.58. So, hope it's clear. Thank you very much.